Hey everybody, this is Dr. Bob again, and I'm here this time at the painted wall of in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison here in Colorado. This is an amazing opportunity for us to look at a feature that has created great confusion among non-biblical geologists, while the Bible provides us with a great explanation of the actual incidents or events that we see here. So what we have here is over 2,000 feet of bedrock, foundation rock, what we call creation rock, that is then topped by a small layer of sediments from the it's actually sandstone from the Entrada formation. It creates a challenge for non-biblical geologists because this basement rock they estimate to be between 1.6 and 1.7 billion years old, while the Entrada formation at the top they estimate to be about 150 to 170,000 years old. Well, the problem is there's no erosion of the type you would see if this foundation rock had been exposed for that 1.4 billion years. We don't see any erosion characteristics to speak of at all. And so we know that it wasn't exposed for that long. So how do we account for the fact that there are no erosion features, and then by non-biblical geologists' estimation, 1.4 to 1.5 billion years pass by before these sediment layers are laid on top of it? Well, we know that even though the formations of the Cambrian and the Silurian, the Ordovician, and the Mississippian are all missing, that doesn't mean that they weren't being deposited elsewhere. And that's the answer to the problem. Because as the waters of the flood began to rise across the earth, so you have the fountains of the deep opening up, the rains coming down, the levels beginning to rise, those deposits were deposited elsewhere on what this basement rock, the Great Unconformity. At the Grand Canyon, the Great Unconformity is topped by a number of rocks, and there's still a gap of over 1 billion years there. And again, no erosion characteristics to speak of. So what we know is that as these water levels began to rise, those deposits were being deposited elsewhere, but this was likely a highland area, and so it didn't receive those any sediment deposits until later in the flood. And so we see these later period flood deposits, but not the earlier ones. Okay? This also gives us a great indication of what can happen with great amounts of water being forced through these cracks that exist likely because of the movement of the Earth's crust. But they would have created these fractures, and the Gunnison River, rather than carving these, is an opportunistic river. And likely the creation of this canyon was a result of an overtopping in the area of Centennial, Colorado, where we can kind of see what has happened there, where there are overflow and great indications of massive amounts of water. Because unlike the non-biblical geologists who look at the carving of these canyons, where they think that the canyons begin to erode at the outlet, we know from the travel of the water and from the evidence that we see in the rocks that actually they form from the head down. And that's what we see here. And that would have been the result of overtopping as these great inland bodies of water were created as glacial waters melted at the end of the ice age. And as the ice dams and the sediment dams broke, those waters then were given access to these crevices and canyons or fractures that already existed and carved these great canyons. What we've seen is with high velocity water, even under relatively low depths of water, but high volumes of water will create great cavitation events which carve into bedrock really rapidly in a matter of just hours. We've seen those results in Mount St. Helens and elsewhere, particularly on dam outlets where there were emergency releases of water. We've seen where it cuts through not only the concrete but the steel and even into the bedrock in a matter of minutes. So carving these canyons in that shorter period of time wouldn't have been much of an obstacle. But as we look across, we see then the sandstone formation of the Entrada, and then immediately below it this foundation rock, which gives us great indication of how these areas were affected by the floodwaters and then in the post-flood events that happened. So once again, a great example of biblical truth and the fact that it's okay to believe, and that if we look at the evidence through a biblical worldview, the results or the evidence is supported by the actual events, and rather than us having to make all kinds of assumptions to make the evidence fit, our worldview. So we're grateful to have those biblical accounts and be able to look at it and say, these things testify of the truth of God's Word. So once again, this is Dr. Bob. I'm here at the Painted Wall in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison in Colorado.